when we start our enterprises, mostly born out of need, obviously, and to solve a particular problem, we also have to go through the steps to make sure that we operate very well in the right environment, requirements of a business, so that our impact is sustained and that it has more financial literacy in partnership with other entities, obviously, but also building capacity around governance and so on. And so putting in place, while these do not speak directly to, let's say, the bottom line of some of these companies, but having these in place really makes these companies better positioned to receive the kind of
challenges of access to finance in the underserved communities. If you're social entrepreneur from civil society, what models have worked well in Civ Fund?
Thank you. First of all, as a feminist fund, we were built to see things differently. In fact, much of the work that we do seeks to disrupt the status quo, the way we knew grant making 10, 15, 30 years ago, where in order to access a grant, for example, you had to look a certain way. You had to, first of all, you had to be an organization. You had to have a long track record. You have to have a board that has a chairperson who looks like our moderator, or, you know, like you had to have a brand. And we're saying, for us at Civ Fund, we look at civil society in its diversity. Civil society does not mean civil society organizations or women's organizations. For the most part, you remember that time when many people thought that when you talk about civil society, you basically mean, you know, civil society organizations, and particular organizations. They have to be big and all. So for us, we seek to disrupt that because we think that civil society is wider than that. Yes, it includes the organizations, but it also includes the everyday people, the commonplace persons. My mother and father, I was impressed when we went down to look at you know, the social entrepreneurs, the mix of the classes and the products that they're selling. It wasn't the usual suspects. I have been to events where for such, you know, symposium, you'd mostly see the big companies, the big names, the big brothers, leaving out small organizations that are actually creating change. And so for us, our understanding of what civil society means is larger than what is traditionally known. But we also know that if we're to support these organizations, we have to pay attention to certain things. I think one of the colleagues in the morning was asking about wellness and burnout. That's a real thing for most social entrepreneurs, for most civil society leaders, especially the people at the top. There are people who are dying slowly, silently, quietly, because they are managing businesses. And so for us, we invest a bit of resources in ensuring that the people that we support are supported as human beings to begin with. We place a high premium on, you know, humanity and what that means to them. We create spaces to rejuvenate, refresh, and even just listen to each other, because most of the traditional funding forces organizations or social entrepreneurs to think that you have to burn out, like somehow you have to look stressed. If you don't go to a meeting looking, you know, like you are badly off, then you won't get a grant. We disrupt that thinking. We want to disrupt that status quo. And also we like to pay attention to helping organizations build reserves, because most of the organizations that have received a lot of this funding will, because the funding is very strict and there is no room for negotiation and conversation, you find that that funding creates a dependency syndrome. And so we seek to also speak to other like-minded foundations, flexible funding to organizations. We give seeds, for example, and I'm excited. I think this morning I met two of some of the Civ Fund partners where we give seeds. They are not loans, they are grants. We acknowledge that there are some people who won't be able to access those grants because they are not yet there. So being able to veer off what is traditionally not about learning together. We do learning at the C Fund. Every time we give grants to our partners, we take them through what we call a financial fitness bootcamp, where we bring together a number of experts, and I think that's where we worked closely with Capital Solutions. We help them on a journey. We handhold them. We create.
And I think what we are learning, Sandra, Lillian, I think what we are learning from the conversation is when you provide a grant, you build capacity. Even when you expect things along the way they will not work, they also make a reserve that in case things don't work out as it was pitched, maybe they are able to get from the reserve. I'd go to Sandra. Sandra, if in relation to what Lillian has mentioned, how can impact investment be used as an address issue? How can impact investment be used to address issues of financial inclusion among vulnerable populations like refugees, women, and the minorities?
Okay, thank you so much. To be honest, when I started business, it was something I was just playing with. So for me, it was a journey that I started just randomly. And I know there are so many young people because Uganda has a large population of young people. And most of them are either unemployed or underemployed. So I believe that impact investment will really help a lot these groups of people, people like when I started, up to now. But also because when I started back then, yes, I was schooled, I had all these, but there are things, I didn't have the money, like the way she said, the seed money, I didn't have it a lot, and I believe it's a great impact to give this money to a woman, to a young person, because it's money that they need to build up. But also, I'll give you an example. When I started building the business in 2014, a woman walked up to me. At that time, I had an option of going back. I kind of literally tears in her eyes. And she talked about how sourcing from her was impacting her, how investing in her, giving her this market was impacting her. And that's where my story changed. Because I thought, okay, she told us about how she was taking her kids to school. She told us about how she's able to look after her household. And that literally changed the way I looked at things, because I was looking at more of profit, but that's when I looked at both profit and impact. That's where my mindset started. 60% are women, and these are people that we provide to a ready market. But you find that out of them, each time you're buying from them, you are not educated. So I so much believe, instead of giving them the handout, if we have this impact investment within, just like the way we have done it, providing them the ready market, providing them a source of where they can be able to take their produces, I believe it's such a great impact you're doing. And you're not just giving them a handout, but you're giving them a fish rod to be able to fish for themselves. And it's something that is sustainable, because we have seen it being sustainable for all this period of 12 years, and it's still growing bigger. And that's where I believe that the impact investment is really, really an important thing. But also, with all the support we have gotten, it also helps us to increase the impact even much more.
Thank you so much, Sandra from Shea Butter. If you know Shea Butter, Sandra is from Shea Butter. Actually, what Sandra mentioned, it is so important. When we walked around that tent looking at the social entrepreneurs, when you look at the value chain, that small holder farmer that plants whatever Shea Butter has to use, that is a value chain. You're making an impact on that smallholder farmer. Then you come here, you have to employ other workers within the farm. That financial inclusion. Someone doesn't need to look for a formal job. That last mile farmer doesn't need to wait for government to provide, maybe, they are waiting, because currently we have what we call parish development model for those families that cannot access income. That smallholder farmer will not line up for fund, because they are able to provide to Shea Butter, and they are able to earn an income on a daily basis. When we go back to private sector foundation, with examples, what have been the successful impact investment projects that have approved financial access to disadvantaged population?
At PSFU, you might have heard we have a project called Grow, which is generating growth opportunities really for women mostly. And what it's doing is improving access to entrepreneur services, but mostly in the space of enterprise development or business development services. We are looking at access to finance. It's one of the components in there, as well as access to production and infrastructure facilities. And within this project, we actually directly loan women as well as young people for the growth of their enterprises. So that's already, the way that it's modeled is that it understands or takes into account the challenges that maybe women might have accessing or having, say, collateral, things like that. And with this, it carves out financing facilities that are more accessible or more enriched compared to, let's say, commercial bank facilities.
Cecilia, maybe to make it more clear, does GROW look at an individual or it looks at a social entrepreneur?
It looks at both, yes. We also have the Young Africa Works project, which, as I mentioned, is targeting creating work opportunities in with a number of different young people. Right now, we are at about a little over 110,000 young people who have been supported to stay in work, but mostly also to just get into work. And in this particular project, one example I'll give is that we have a franchise model where one company, a very large brand, which I won't mention here, is franchising young people to it's franchising young people to open their own shops. But one, of course, to open a shop is quite challenging, and especially within the trade, stock financing is a real problem. So through our work with different partners, we have supported access to, and not just for the shop owner, but also for the other individuals that they work with, because they employ other young people who are maybe doing deliveries, young people who are supporting with the marketing and things like that. So the options are available. Maybe just to mention one last one, we also, one of the partners that we are working with, and what we are doing is helping them by discounting through other partners, discounting their first consignment of mushroom gardens. There was someone producing mushrooms. So yes, they are discounting for younger people, accessing the product.
Thank you, Cecilia. She has mentioned some of the successful projects at private sector foundation that grow, and the one for the young people focusing on the youth. We would go back to Lillian, and Lillian, maybe you'd mention what are the most critical interventions that support or hinder the growth of impact investments for civil society. In 1 minute.
First of all, I think that the biggest issue has been the mindset. Mindset, again, I go back because I work in a field where if you're doing a lot of grant making, your first points of contact are always organizations, right? Organizations that are registered and all. But for us, we have the privilege of also working with different, we call them differently organized. We think that people don't have to look the same to deliver. In fact, our biggest success stories have come from small groups of women who can't speak the English we are speaking here. They will not come to Kampala every weekend, but they are doing amazing big things in the areas where they work. So one of the biggest issues within the civil society organizations, I'll particularly speak to that, has been the mindset, because we're working with, I know that a number of organizations have been used to getting, grants from donor agencies like GIZ here present and many other donors, and they're in the business of burning up to zero. If you don't finish this money, and now we're in the last quarter, I was earlier having a chat with Sissy, and I was asking her how she is, and she's like, we're in quarter 4. And I was like, story of my life. We're in quarter 4, right? So for most organizations, they are looking at where can we put this money? The year is coming to an end. The pressure of, oh my God, we have. So right now, between now and December, there will be all that I can burn this money. And there are no conversations around options to reinvest this money, to make it grow, to make it like a seed, so that if you fail to appropriate it to a particular activity, it can actually either grow as a seed, but it can also be reallocated or having a conversation even with the donors. So the mindset has been on the side of the partners, but also on a number of our traditional, with a number of some donors who, if you have $1 million, she was talking about $5 million. And so there are sometimes organizations, if you have not spent the $500,000 by December 15th, you have to take it back. I mean, what's that? We are living in a world where if we want organizations to grow, we should also, on our side, on those who are giving the funding, allow that flexibility that asks, what else can we do? So for me, it's really the challenge of the mindset that's coming from the giver, but also it's passed on and handed on back to the implementer, who is left with no options because of the lack of flexibility.
Thank you, Lillian. Lillian has highlighted some of the hindrances is